Oh, so I need to say that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. And again, welcome, Pat Elder. It's a pleasure to have you present at tonight's meeting on Veterans for Peace, New York City chapter. As I mentioned earlier, Pat, I know, is a member of the board of directors of World Beyond War, as well as a member of Veterans for Peace. It's a pleasure to have you here tonight, Pat. And tonight you'll be talking about the poisoning of Gaza, as well as the poisoning of United States troops. And it's kind of incredible to bring around the evils of the American empire full cycle, since we were talking earlier about the poisoning of the people in Vietnam by the chemical companies and Agent Orange, and the poisoning of United States troops during that same time. And today, as Ben Chitty said, we don't know how much has changed. We thank you so much for coming tonight and presenting to us, to our American colleagues and Japanese colleagues, information about the continuation of what is going on from the United States military, the Department of Defense, and the continuing use of poisons by the United States and the world. Pat Elder, thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Susan. Let's see. Should I click the green share screen button to get going here?
Whenever you want to start your PowerPoint, go ahead. Yeah.
Right away. I don't have anything else to say. We'll get right into it, and it's quite a few screens. So let's see. How does that look, Ellen?
That looks great.
Great, that's super. I want to thank Rachel Clark right off the bat. I gave the slides show to Rachel yesterday, and she worked her magic with it. And I'm telling you, you know, we've just linked up, and we've made a great team together. So, Rachel Clark, thank you. Actually, I have two different presentations tonight. The first one deals with Gaza in particular, and I tried at my best to apply everything I know about chemical contamination to the situation in Gaza, and it's so upsetting. And the second part of this presentation will involve a look at Fort Ord. And Susan just mentioned Agent Orange, and I discovered that the United States Army sprayed 9,000 acres of land at Fort Ord that soldiers used for training over a 20-year period, and never made it public. And in the meantime, the Veterans Affairs Administration is refusing to take care of literally thousands of sickened veterans and their dependents. I'll get into that. So I don't know where we are here, Rachel. Should I just go to the second screen, and you can let me know? So I read Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, as an undergraduate in 1975. And then I listened to it again as I drove across the country about 6 or 7 years ago, just trying to take water samples and photos of contamination at military bases across the country. This woman has had an amazing impact on me, but look at her quote. I mean, she was talking about DDT, but man, we better had to know something about their power. And I'm trusting that Rachel's good. So let's get into it with Gaza. If you get an opportunity, this woman, Nada Majdalani, is extremely powerful on video. So Al Jazeera has done a great job. In fact, a lot of the Arab media has done a wonderful job, and so is Arab, the Iranian Republic broadcasting television station. They're all on it. I mean, you wouldn't know there's any suffering at all if you listen, to Nancy Pelosi or CNN. But Nada puts it out there. She's the Palestinian director of Eco Peace Middle East. And, when you get a chance, and we'll share this PowerPoint with everyone, you got to listen to what she has to say. It is gripping. Next slide. Let's see. Here we go. She described the situation. We're at the verge of an environmental catastrophe in terms of the spread of diseases and the accumulation of corpses in the streets. This makes Gaza susceptible to pandemic diseases. So, I never promised a rose garden here. It gets worse. So, right, throughout much of Gaza now, wastewater treatment plants are no longer working. And even in the best of times, even in developed countries, wastewater treatment plants are only conduits for industrial pollutants entering into our rivers because things have been so softened. We're still operating under a Clean Water Act from 1986. Hasn't really been updated, and we're way behind the Europeans as far as what is allowed in our waters. But here in Gaza, fecal matter floats in the streets with corpses. Heavy metals like zinc, chromium, copper, platinum, titanium, cadmium, nickel, and vanadium may be coursing through the streets and flushing into the sea, along with PFAS and phosphorus. Phosphorus, of course, from the white phosphorus weaponry used by Israeli Defense Forces and supplied by the United States government. Wastewater treatment facilities everywhere are conduits for chemical contamination, as I said. Human beings need clean water, and they're largely deprived of that. And so we have an outbreak of dysentery and great pain and suffering among mostly the children, young children. You have to give people clean water. And so you could see this in their faces. It's extremely dangerous for people to be drinking rainwater and untreated salty water. The rainwater is contaminated with the white phosphorus and other contaminants. And of course, the salty water is no good for the kidneys and the livers. So there's a danger of parasitic infections, and I don't know, I just mentioned a couple, but hepatitis and chickenpox. Meanwhile, the Israeli military is pumping fuel and seawater into the tunnels throughout Gaza. And, before this conflict started, it was estimated by the UN that 97% of the aquifer, that's the underground water in Gaza, was unfit for drinking. And now none of it is fit for drinking. And because of the actions of the Israeli government, may never be. It's something that we don't understand, But if you pump certain chemicals into an aquifer, you could poison them forever. Now, burning a massive apartment building can generate many thousands of toxic chemicals. We don't know how deadly they are. Science just hasn't been able to keep up with it. But I've taken these pictures, and this is probably going to sound a little weird, but if you blow them up, and there's one of a Syrian town that was bombed by U.S. forces, you can see faces in the black smoke. Blow it up and look. I'm not nuts. It's scary stuff. And so, we just have to understand that what goes up. And all of the chemicals. I mean, think of an apartment building burning, and the plastics and the phones and the textiles and the carpet and the human and animal corpses, and the treated lumber and plywood and flooring, asbestos, lead, paint, synthetic fabrics, electronics, furniture, household chemicals. This is why firefighters are fighting many different types of cancers. I mean, even their respiratory systems can't protect them. So this is something we don't think about. But there's an environmental catastrophe every time you fire a bullet. But of all those things, the asbestos kicks around. Respiratory ailments and cardiac hazards and cancers are connected with exposures to an environment affected by these fires. Now, yeah, you've heard of white phosphorus, and I did some studying about October 11th, and if you remember, the initial attack, and of course, no violence is justified, but that initial attack by Hamas and others on innocent Israelis was responded by the IDF the next day, and they literally burned thousands of people. I think that's what history will show us. And they did so by using American supplied white phosphorus. And it is horrendous. It lights your skin on fire. And you can see here, huge city blocks just covered with this stuff. I mean, manufacturers use it for bombs and computer chips and rat poison. That's the world we live in. It's carcinogenic. It's a killer. Now I have a graphic slide next. So, if you want to close your eyes, for the next slide, I'll let you know, but I'm going to flip it in 3 seconds. Okay. And here we have a child who, picked up little bits of the white phosphorus. And so people have reported seeing smoke coming from deep in their wounds, and water doesn't put it out. You just wait till it burns out. It's absorbed through the skin and into the body, where it can affect the liver, the kidney, and the heart. And that's the real problem. I mean, of course, this is terrible, but it won't go away for many people alive. It just will continue to kill. But, sorry to bring you down there, but there is hope. And so it ought to make you feel better that there's resistance all around the world. And that's why it was so wonderful to go to Japan. What's happening in Okinawa is a beautiful thing. And the Okinawans are waking up the mainland. And so I love Japan and I love the Japanese people. And, I concentrated with Rachel on the PFAS in Japan. And we were treated extremely well, and people were agape. And I recognize that that it's not the folks in Maryland that are going to stop it. And it's not the folks in California that are going to stop it. But it's people in a little place like Okinawa that have tremendous power. And that's where the United States empire is most vulnerable. They don't know how to control this. And I'll talk about the mayor of Yokosuka a little bit later. He's a hero. But anyway, hey, 75 peace-loving people blocked entrances to Boeing's manufacturing plant. Man, I'm there. So, yeah, it's just, isn't the solidarity wonderful? You know, when you don't know many people and you go to an event like this and say, hey, how you doing, sister? And you hug somebody and, yeah, we got to do something. And it's just like there. It's beautiful. We are dissenters, and they blocked the bomb, factory in St. Louis, Missouri. Very cool. So this is where the JDAMs are made, and the Joint Direct Attack Munition. It's an add-on kit that turns dumb bombs into smart ones. And so all of the JDAMs in the world are made in this single factory. And of course, these wonderful people understand that, and they shut it down. Might only have been a minute or two, but doggone it, they did it. I want to be there next time, right? But think about the world we live in. Israeli and American warriors simply key in GPS coordinates 33.400953611514. And if you go to Google Maps, and Rachel and I did a lot of this in Japan last summer. But if you go to Google Maps and you copy and paste these GPS coordinates, instead of putting in Silver Spring, Maryland, you put this in, and boom, you'll see a building in the heart of Damascus, Syria. That's how it works. This is what projecting power means. The American empire projects power. So the 2,000-pound GBU 31 JDAM is a weapon that is horrendous. And you can see him here on the flight deck of the Harry S. Truman. And this was, 2 days after shock and awe in 2003. And you can see how the industrial might of this country can be put to such wicked uses. People are employed. The JDAMs produce these bunker busters. So Washington has donated these bombs to Israel with the JDAMs. And my understanding, although cursory, is that someone on the ground in Gaza is an Israeli agent and says they think that Hamas people are at a certain address. They're not sure, but it's all it takes. And another thing about Hamas, been over there several times, and Hamas was worried about providing electricity for people. Hamas was worried about providing plumbing for people. Hamas has been all about making sure people eat. What we hear is their last name is terrorist, as if they're not human beings. Now, I'm not defending violence, as I lambast my own government. But anyway, this 2,000-pound bomb, BLU 109, is designed to kill civilians. It has 550 pounds of tritiol, like TNT, which is deadly poison when it explodes and particles fill the air. It also poisons the surface water, which heads into the sea or the rivers. It also poisons the groundwater. And I found this to be amazing statistic for what it's worth. You know, I mean, here, this is educational, this is knowledge, this is almost like entertainment. The end of our presentation, and again, thanks to Rachel, I'll give you some things you can do. But right now, General Dynamics, if it happened to be a country all its own, it's wealthier than half of the countries in the world. I mean, and they spend a ton of money on Capitol Hill. Of course they do. It's like, you know, I've learned a lot in the last few years about the power of the United States Senate's Environment and Public Works Committee. You know, you guys got to wake up about PFAS. And you know, they're not listening. And that's because of the money from the chemical industry. And so you can look up each one of these people and you can look at the amount of money that they've received from the chemical industry, and you can see why this is happening. There's so much money from, you know, the weapons makers and the chemical industry. And so I guess I'm going to alienate a couple people here, especially in the current political climate, but I couldn't leave it alone, man, you know. But the two top recipients right now came for campaign cash from this manufacturer of weaponry are Tim Kaine and Adam Smith. And they, you know, Tim's on the U.S. Senate Armed Services Committee, and Smith's the ranking member, you know, like the minority member of the House Armed Services Committee. So General Dynamics, they know what they're doing. They know how the game is played. And these guys continue to get reelected. You know, I ran against Steny Hoyer and I got 1.3% of the vote in 1998 and, 2018. Sorry about that. And they love Steny Hoyer. I mean, I went door to door and talked to people, and, you know, he got 75% of the vote and never showed up for a single town hall. And he's in his 44th year in Congress. And I think that they would vote him into office even after he dies. It's like that. But anyway, I don't vote for Democrats or Republicans. Have you ever heard of RDX? Oh my God. So ProPublica is wonderful. And they publish bombs in your backyard, and but you know, the explosive compound RDX helped to make America a superpower. Now it's poisoning the world, and it's really the explosive charge in lots of conventional bombs. And you know, they've done tremendous work on RDX. It doesn't go away. Just one little bomb, one little grenade. It'll kill for years. And the poor folks in Gaza, God bless them, man. They, you know, they can be exposed if they breathe RDX. And they can be exposed to drinking the contaminated water by touching contaminated soil. It's just one thing, but it's associated with liver injury and edema and all kinds of diseases. And we'll get to that. I mean, I want to take you through a quick cursory shot of PubChem, which is a miraculous database compiled by the National Institute of Health, and you can begin to find out what these chemicals do. Okay, so now I'm gonna switch the subject here. And talk about what has consumed me for the last 2 years. Ask Rachel about that. Oh my God, this woman, and she is a heroine. Julie Akey, served at Fort Ord, gosh, in the, I think it was 96 and 97. She was, in their language institute for 2 years learning Arabic. And she was only there for a year and a half. And she came down with multiple myeloma, which is a fatal blood disease. And that was about 4 or 5 years ago. And she wondered if anybody else at Fort Ord, had come down with the same disease. And she found 138 people in her neighborhood, and the extended community also had multiple myeloma. And, the ATSDR, that's the Toxic Substances Disease Registry of the CDC. They, they did a study of the drinking water and at Fort Ord in the 90s, and they said everything was fine. That there's no contamination and everything's healthy. Fine and dandy, as Forrest Gump would say. So that means that the Army can say, hey, man, we didn't do it, which means that the VA can tell a veteran who is dying from diseases that are obviously attributable to the drinking water that they're not going to pay for their deaths. They're not going to address their suffering. Here's Julie. Active duty, 96, 97. Multiple myeloma. She started to wonder. And I'm telling you, in the PFAS world, it's the women. God, it's the women. Like why women were told don't get pregnant at George Air Force Base. It's the women who are the advocates. So anyway, again, she found 138 with cancer, and half are already dead. She is struggling herself. She is sick today. She had chemo last week, and she's just beginning to recover from that. So, her prognosis kind of bounces back and forth. But, she drank trichloroethylene, we think, along with a couple other nasty chemicals. And we know that trichloroethylene causes multiple myeloma. Now, I'm not going to click on this database because I'm just afraid of what might happen. But if you get this PDF, you can click on her database, and she's got 1,500 people on there, and she has tracked all of their deaths and all of their illnesses, all of their cancers, and all of their diseases. This is just one base. Look at this. This isn't the federal government. This is a woman who's being told up until 2 months ago that she has to take care of her own suffering, that the Army is not going to take care of her. And she went out and found this information, and she's documented it, and she has everybody's name and address and rank and serial number, man. Wow. So, but anyway, ATSDR says there's no problem. Well, Julie and Katie Porter, a representative from California, prevailed on ATSDR, and they're going to take a second look. But they say they're not going to look at any health risks after 1984. We don't understand it. Sick and dying vets are told the Army was not responsible. And Julie presented her data to the ATSDR, and she helped them to come to a conclusion to re-examine their water. We don't know where they are with their study. The ATSDR says it will not look at chemicals and exposure pathways for people living and working at Fort Ord from 85 through 94. So Julie's petition requested a new assessment because the availability of new scientific data, I mean, they didn't even track PFAS. And also since 96, the federal government has changed its thresholds of toxicity for many chemicals. So when they did the study, ATSDR said, oh, it's fine to drink this much lead. Oh, it's okay to drink this much trichloroethylene. But today we know it's deadly. So AKI filed a petition with ATSDR and said, hey, you guys, you think you could take another look? She did that on behalf of the 1,200 people in her database. This is one woman. She informed the agency in April 2023. I've been working with this woman for a couple of years, and so has Denise Trabick-Pointer. Denise put 42 years in as a chemical scientist for DuPont. This woman knows what she's doing. She is a powerful force. She's with the Sierra Club's Toxic Action Team. And I brought her into this scene, and she has really made the difference. I mean, it's one thing to be a political activist like myself, but it's another thing to have that 42 years of chemical experience behind you. You know, it makes it good. So she can write at a level that is, you know, higher than an 8th grade level, which is about where you need to pitch things these days. I'm good at the 8th grade level writing, you know. So anyway, she informed the agency in April 2023. She was concerned about the end date, you know. And what the Army always says is, oh, well, you know, active operations at the fort ended in 1994, but you had thousands and thousands of people coursing through the base after 1994. They weren't making war. They were doing things like language and other studies. Okay. So extremely high levels of these toxins were reported in the water Julie drank. We have records. We have records that show when she was there, trichloroethylene, tetrachloroethylene, and dichloroethane and methyl chloride. Now, these are the killers at Camp Lejeune. Now, what the hell? And they're the same chemicals at Wurtsmith and at George Air Force Base. You've got thousands of veterans at these bases, and not just those two. Oh my God, it's all over. Who are dying because they drank this stuff. You know, they cleaned engines, right? They washed engine parts and cleaned jets, and they cleaned tanks, and they used these chemicals, and they just went into the ground. And in bases where people drank groundwater, they drank this stuff. So, you know, I came to this through the PFAS, you know, and I managed to get a document through the DOD that, you know, talked about how much PFAS was in the water. So, you know, work with Julie, and she requested ATSDR add an evaluation of the documented PFAS that we know is in the water today. And we also know that PFAS were used on base since the early 1970s. By the way, sorry, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, they were discovered by DuPont in, oh my God, 1938 and in New Jersey. And they're just great for putting out fires. They're great for cleaning engines, and they're great for repelling water. In fact, there is no chemical on Earth that does these three things better. But there are over 100 different deathly diseases and cancers associated with drinking this stuff or eating it. The other thing about PFAS is it never goes away. It never goes away. And we don't know what to do with it. So once you make it, the genie's out of the bottle. We can't burn it. We can't bury it. We don't know what to do with it. It is there for good. Oops. So anyway, this is the data that I found, and it's kind of come in handy, you know. So groundwater on base, 100 feet down, contain 19,000 parts per trillion of PFOS. That's one kind of PFAS. The problem with that stuff is that it gets into the surface water and it bioaccumulates in fish. The Japanese people know that now. Rachel and I think we went to 16 cities, and that was our main message. You got US bases contaminating your fish. And last time I checked, you know, Japanese people eat a lot of fish. Anyway, it bioaccumulates up to about 2,000 times, you know, in the fish. So if you have 10 parts per trillion of PFOS in the water, then you have 2,000 times that in the fillet of the fish. So I saw this data, and this was recent, but it's been around. They've used the stuff for 70 years, since the 1970s. So the 19,000 parts per trillion of PFOS is about 1 million times over what the EPA says is safe. And PFO, 335,000 times over their threshold. So we're pretty darn sure. And scientists among us say, definitely, back in the 90s, people drank this. I'm still drinking it. So one thing that's really cool is, and I never thought I'd live to see this day, but one of the vets at Fort Ord, you know, we have a Fort Ord Facebook page, and so it's littered with all these anecdotal things, and you know, all this stuff about suffering and death, and then also scientific things, and so the guy, you know, went to the VA and said, "Hey, man, I'm on 100% disability because I'm dying with, you know, colon cancer." And I saw this article in Military Poisons, and it said that, you know, it's associated with PFAS, and I saw that there's high levels of PFAS, and they gave him 100% disability. So we have people within the VA who apparently appreciate our work. Now, this is where it really gets maddening, and you kind of get an idea of what you're up against, you know. But you got to Google VA PFAS blood testing. And, you know, the Veterans Administration basically says, well, everybody in the world has PFAS in their blood. We don't know where it comes from. It's in frying pans, and so we discourage it because we don't know that we could gain anything from the science. Bullshit. Now, I worked with the National Academies of the Sciences as a community liaison in 2002 and 2003. And, you know, I had 2 missions along with a dozen of us who were, you know, trying to steer the ship, right? One thing was, we got to get you guys to give advice to physicians on, you know, what kind of clinical advice they should give to patients at certain levels of PFAS in their blood. And then we also tried to get them to publish some sort of fearful warning that eating fish can, you know, poison babies and change the trajectory of the human race. So they did give the advice to the physicians. They held off on the fish. And that's not the focus of this, but because of the bioaccumulation of PFOS in the fish, that is our greatest threat. It's not the drinking water, it's the fish. And then, of course, the beef and the pork and other food. So anyhow, the National Academy says that if you have more than 2 parts per billion of a total of 7 different compounds, you got to get yourself checked for all kinds of diseases. And that is the way to, bring in preventative treatment. And so they also say, let me go back, that if you have 20, then you should be more than 20 parts per billion of PFOS in your blood. Then you ought to have a huge barrage of tests. Well, in Japan, oh my God, south of Yokota Air Base, people were drinking highly contaminated water thanks to the United States Air Force. And so, associates and friends and scientists and community activists that live in that area, Tama, of Western Tokyo, took it upon themselves to test their blood and found most people have blood levels above 20 parts per billion, and that they were poisoned by the United States Air Force, and they should immediately have liver testing, kidney testing, breast cancer testing, testicular cancer testing, etc. And the Japanese government has largely ignored their findings. It's the power of the United States empire. But not all Japanese are chickens. Now, Susan, you talked earlier about Agent Orange, and so I just discovered this. People, there's been so much anecdotal evidence on this, Fort Ord Facebook page. People saying basically, we know there was, Agent Orange. There's so many people who have died from Agent Orange caused types of diseases. We have people that say they remember the barrels and they remember spraying stuff. And yet, because ATSDR gave it a clean bill of health and the Army never admitted to using the stuff there, people have been allowed to die. So let me get into this. It's a little complicated, a little bit of math, but it's not just Agent Orange, there's Agent Green and Agent Pink and Purple, and there's a rainbow, man, like blue and white, and then Agent Orange. And they all included either 2,4-D and or 2,4,5-T. Now, these are both herbicides on their own. Some of them kill fruits. Some of them kill vegetables. Some of them are great for poison oak, and some of them are great for other things. And so, these agents were used at Fort Ord from the 1950s and as late as 1980. I will share the results with you. I haven't shared this outside of the Fort Ord community anywhere. This is it. So, we will see, how in step the corporate media is. I'm hoping that the Associated Press will pick the story up. They did a story on Julie 2 years ago, and it really helped with her petition to get the ATSDR to open it up for a second look. So this is explosive. So agents purple and orange contained a mixture of these two. Green and pink had only 2,4,5-T, and that's the one that contains dioxin. Now, I don't know how your mind works, but when I think of dioxin, I think of those deformed Vietnamese babies. And no, I don't have a photo of it. But dioxin is still killing us, and so is the Vietnam War, and people are still suffering. This stuff doesn't go away very quickly either. So Agent Orange was made with a 50-50 mix of the two. Agent Purple had a higher concentration than Agent Orange. So they mixed the stuff up and they treated 9,000 acres. I mean, what happened was, and the photos are amazing. Like, you've got these massive oak trees and the bottom 8, 10, 12 feet is covered in poison oak. I don't know if you remember, like I remember as a kid, just like, I mean, it's mostly poison ivy in Maryland, but it's poison oak out there. But man, I would get so sick, miss school. I mean, it was terrible. Some other kids in the neighborhood wouldn't get sick at all. So what the Army figured was they wanted it for training, and Fort Ord was the #1 place for soldiers to grovel in the dirt and train for both Korea and Vietnam. I mean, they trained 1.5 million soldiers groveled in the dirt, and most of those soldiers, I believe, were exposed to Agent Orange. These lethal mixtures were sprayed at a rate of about 1.5 gallons of herbicide per acre, and this would equate to 13,500 gallons a year. Oh, hell, I don't know, 270,000 gallons, or 4,909 55-gallon drums over that time period. Now, it's interesting, and I can't take credit for this. I think some activists can, but you know, it's the cynical side of us basically says, you know, VA, yeah, let's throw the dogs a bone. Most of those guys are dead anyway. What the hell? We'll start taking care of people exposed to Agent Orange in the States, because they tested this stuff in bases around the country. And I mean, in Maryland, long story, I don't want to get into it, but Aberdeen Proving Ground and Fort Detrick. Fort Detrick is a death cauldron, by the way, you know, because it's where the biological weapons were always concocted, but they played with this stuff as well. But, you know, it's still poisonous at these places. And so you know, go Google, you know, February 12th, 24. This is a historic day. And it's when the VA basically said, hey, we're going to open up Agent Orange health coverage. Now, you know, I don't know how it's going to play out in Okinawa. Okinawa, you know, has a fair amount of stuff and a lot of exposure, and other places outside of Vietnam. But they are willing to allow soldiers to claim in a VA petition a presumptive cause, and you know, immediately they will say, oh, you have diabetes mellitus too. Sure, your Agent Orange exposure probably caused that, and so you get 100% disability. So this is an important act. I think there are a dozen states or 13 states and 30 or 40 different bases. You have to look at it. But for the Army's part, you know, they don't want to deal. I mean, you know, let's compare this quote to what Susan ran initially with that beautiful indigenous people's video. Combat-ready forces depend on our successful stewardship of the environmental asset that created optimal training and testing environments. Like, what the hell are you talking about, man? An environmental asset. Yep, it's an asset for war making. That's great. I'm getting toward the end. Got a few more slides here. Bear with me, please. Bombs in your backyard. I don't know if you've been there before, but man, it's just great. And I've spent, I don't know how many hours on this, but it's again, ProPublica. And what they did is they did a series of FOIAs from the DoD in 2015 and 2016. You got all of the groundwater contamination from all of the bases in the US. Remarkable. Not only that, but soil and sediment contamination as well. So for a lot of bases, you can just go, Wordsmith Air Force Base, Drum in New York, or I don't care, England and Louisiana, and you can find what was in the groundwater and the concentrations. So this is an explosive. If we could get people to do this, you can really learn how they poisoned you. So once you go to a particular base, and let me go back a second here. There you go, groundwater. Okay, sorry. Once you go to a particular base, and you're at oh heck, Fort Sill, and you realize that you'd worked with trichloroethylene because you were an engine mechanic, and you take the parts off of a Jeep or a tank, and you clean them with the trichloroethylene. You breathe stuff in, and you did it for 4 years, and you came down with multiple myeloma or whatever have you. A couple of years later, you can go to the NIH's PubChem site, and you can type in trichloroethylene. And thanks, Rachel. This is what you come up with. You just type in PubChem, and boom, you get a search engine. Very cool. Whoa. So these diseases are associated with trichloroethylene. Now, you could be a soldier suffering with hepatitis and neurotoxicity syndromes and thyroid disease. And you can say, oh my God, I worked with trichloroethylene. PubChem. Just type it in. Type it in, and you see below, comes up all caps. You click on that. And you cursor down a little bit, and there's all kinds of contents, and chemical vendors. I love that. People who sell it. But you see where it says associated disorders and diseases. You click on that. And you can download an Excel spreadsheet. And this one has 70 diseases associated with it. Rachel, you're dazzling me with all of these bells and whistles. I appreciate you so much. Oh my God. Okay. So, you get the Excel spreadsheet, and you see all the horrible things that are associated with this one contaminant. You get the idea. So again, I've been working with this Fort Ord research team, and I'm just a street urchin radical dude from Washington D.C., and I don't have a degree in the sciences, but I am working with these scientists, and we've whittled things down to a few chemicals, and these are the most deadly ones. And there's a couple of them we left off. We left off PFAS. That should probably be in there, but wait a minute. So We are working on a kind of program, and I could use help within Veterans for Peace, perhaps. So a vet is sick, okay, and he did his service, I don't know, at Wordsmith and at Spangdahlem in Germany, and he was a chrome plater. I don't know. He worked with dipping metal parts into hexavalent chromium, and so we should be able to have a system where that vet is suffering from let's say multiple myeloma, or he's suffering from cardiac disease, or host or kidney cancer, and he clicks on a database. We call this digital triage, and he clicks on colon cancer, testicular cancer, and then he sees the 4 or 5 chemicals that are associated with that, and then he goes to where he served, Wordsmith, and he finds the chemicals that are in the groundwater. This is potentially explosive. So thank you very much. And I guess I will stop sharing my screen. Are you all still there? Everybody's still there?
Everybody's here and riveted, Pat. Thank
Oh,
you
geez.
so much for
Is
your
he-
extraordinary
I'm
presentation.
Good one, Pat.
Is that Ann right?
That's Ann Wright. Yes.
Can I have a beer now?
And thank you. Thank
Pat,
you.
Thank you.
I love you all. Doing what I can.
Thank you, Pat. It's extraordinary to think about all of the horrendous damage and destruction that's been caused by chemical companies in this country, because you remind me, Pat, so much of the data and the studies that have been done on Agent Orange dioxin, and how the chemical companies making these incredible products to destroy people in Southeast Asia and to destroy their own troops in Southeast Asia, that continues for generations, because we continue to look at the impact on the Vietnamese people and on the children of American veterans who were overseas. And the damage continues and the destruction continues. Thank you so much for your extraordinary presentation. And Rachel, thank you so much for your wonderful help with the presentation. We'll start now with questions. And I have to admit, I get a little envious when I see your background of
She's
Hawaii.
in Washington.
She is not.
Where is she? Where are you?
I am in Hawaii. I finally came home after
Yeah.
6 weeks. And while that background is the fake one, I'll show you the one from my apartment. Oh, it's the same. It's good to be home, but the fight continues in Washington, D.C. to ceasefire, no more money to Israel for those bombs that have crucified, tore Gaza. And Pat, thanks for all the information that we can use to highlight all of the terrible things that are going on. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And you remind me, and when you just mentioned this white phosphorus that was used throughout the 1960s in Vietnam. So we know, we have that information, that when it touches human beings, it burns down to the bone and kills the organs. So we in this country, Americans, really do have a responsibility to keep working on these issues. And thank you, Anne, always for your exuberance in encouraging us to continue our work. We have to. And as somebody that has lived through, again, the wars in Southeast Asia and heard your presentation today, I'm just struck by the familiarity of all of it. And I'll just say that again, we try to keep hope alive. We try to keep going, and we need to. We do have that responsibility as Americans in this country to stop what we do all over the world.
Susan.
Thank
before-
you. Akiko, yeah.
Yeah, before we take questions, I just want to make sure that everybody knows that there is simultaneous translation going on. And if you joined late and you're an English speaker, you might not realize, but there might be people who are going to speak in Japanese, and you're going to want to go to the bottom of your screen, or I guess the top if you're on an iPad, and click on the little globe that says interpretation and choose the English channel so that you can get, in case any of our Japanese speaking guests are also asking questions, that you can get the translations. Thanks.
Thank you, Ellen. Akiko.
Hi. Pat. Hi, Pat. I'm long time no see.
Oh, yeah.
I'm very happy now.
Oh.
And はい、レイチェル、すみません。日本語で通訳してもらえますか？今関西で。
Right now in Kansai area in Japan, the many people talking that the PFAS is very dangerous. PFAS is a hot potato in Kansai area in Japan, and each municipalities are really doing a lot of blood testing. And we're just waiting for the results coming up. And here's a question for Pat. So, okay, a friend of mine who is in the area asked me to ask Pat. So PFAS doesn't go away even after boiling in the water? Would you please answer?
Well, last time I checked, boiling is 212 Fahrenheit. And
212 Fahrenheit?
correct. And we need to get PFAS burned under a flame at 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit.
Thank you, Pat.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that we are working with a team in Japan who understand this, and they are working to create incinerators that will get that hot. And I believe that if we get the Japanese mind and we set that mind, that brilliant mind, and its industrial capability on PFAS, the Japanese nation can save the world from this scourge. It ain't going to happen in America because of the money in the political system. It's bad in Japan, but it's not anywhere as bad as here. Did you get that, Rachel?
Yes, I translated. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Barros.
Oh, thank you very much. Pat, I've been following your emails for some time. I'm working with the DU group, or the newly reconstituted Uranium Weapons, Cluster Munitions, and Landmines Working Group. And we've been wanting to ascertain whether depleted uranium weapons are in use in Gaza.
Oh, okay. Well, I can, yes, they are. And man, did I ever get lambasted by a couple people after that article on poisoning Gaza. I got a couple emails. I will forward one in particular, which really encapsulates all of it. Yeah, I did not mention depleted uranium, but there is a record of its use, and there are two different PhDs. one I think Israeli and one American, and they got this covered. And oh yeah, they've used mostly my understanding, again, I don't know, but it's not like the Palestinians had tanks, but they did have metal barriers, and so if I think the IDF felt it incumbent to use armor piercing munitions there. I will send you that. So maybe put it in chat and I'll pick it up.
Yes, I did. I put the question in the chat earlier and my address is with it.
Okay, and will somebody copy and paste that chat and give it to everybody?
I'll put in there again now.
I will copy it and pull out the relevant section.
yeah,
I'll
yeah.
go out with the minutes from the meeting.
Thanks, Ellen.
Thank you. There are
In the
other
chat.
questions for Pat, comments.
Really?
Right. This is your opportunity.
I think everybody is just blown away and devastated by all this information.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, I
お願いします。
I know it's a lot. But I think
レイチェルさん、中澤
We
で
got
す。
we had a
We have a
couple more
couple of
hands.
hands. Yes, Sharon,
So
go
the
ahead.
lady from Tokushima. Hi, Pat.
Hi there.
Thank you, Pat. We
I'm s-
we received
hold
you.
on-
Wait a
hold on a
second,
second.
Rachel, let
Thank you.
Susan call on people.
Rachel, right. Rachel,
Yes.
right.
I'm
There are people who
translating.
are raising their
Yes.
hands, right. Sharon,
So,
go ahead.
Kazuyo Nakazawa would like to ask Pat a question, okay?
Sure, we'll call it next. Could we start?
Kazuyo, okay?
Oh, hold on 1 second. It's okay,
much better.
Kazuo, go right ahead. Thank you, and Sharon, you'll be next.
です。レイチェルさんから今、
So, as Rachel mentioned before, we are in Tokushima, Japan, and we have toxic waste management study group funded by somewhat for 3 years. It's been funded by the government sponsored program, and we've been studying how much PFAS can be dissolvable through our project. And as I've been listening to Pat's presentation, I wonder why human being can do such a horrendous thing. It's so scary, and we've been poisoned, our body, especially our children, the next generations. I really wonder what we can do, and from now on in Japan, we really have to keep doing our studies, and let's hope we can do it. Thank you for your presentation today.
Well, thank you, Kazuya. I think the number one way people are affected is from wastewater treatment plants and their solid waste, which is usually applied on agricultural fields, and their liquid effluent, which simply goes into the sea. Now, the solid waste contaminates the soil and the crops. Usually those crops are fed to chickens and cows. And so we saw it in Japan, where you have chicken and you have beef that have many tens of thousands of parts per trillion of PFAS. That is your second way of consuming the stuff. The wastewater treatment plants also dump into the sea. And so your fish are profoundly poisoned. And we've documented that. You have some fish with 8 million parts per trillion when the EPA says you ought to keep the drinking water under 1 part per trillion. I mean, it's like that. But the good news is that we can filter the stuff out. We have technology, and it's not outrageously expensive. And so that's why I applaud the mayor of Yokosuka, and I wish I could remember this guy's name. But he wrote a letter to the Ministry of Defense and Environment and the U.S. Forces Japan 3 days ago, and he said, "What are you doing? You put these filters in the wastewater treatment plant at Yokosuka Naval Base after you saw that there were and I forget exactly the number, 29,000 parts per trillion or 19,000 parts per trillion, or something absolutely ridiculous. It only takes, a few parts per trillion of PFOS to contaminate the fish. This was in the many, many thousands dumped into the sea at Yokosuka. And the mayor is, asked for the latest test results. And the United States Navy said, we're not going to give them to you. Not only that, we're not using the filter systems anymore. We had set them up, but now we figure it's stable enough. We're not going to give you the test results. We're not going to filter the stuff anymore. And so the Japanese are under the impression that there are leaks, leaks of PFAS into the water systems. That's not it. It's chronic. A base like Yokosuka is using PFAS in chrome plating, in wire coating, in engine cleaning, in firefighting. There's a whole host of applications, and at the end of the day, the stuff is all squirted out and goes to the wastewater treatment plant. It's part of doing modern business. Computer chips are full of PFAS. At the end of the day, the PFAS goes to the wastewater treatment plant. So when I hear the coverage in the Japanese media about, another leak of PFAS detected, that's not it. It's just the cost of doing military and industrial business in a modern world. So thanks for winding me up, Kazuya. Man.
Thank you,
I get
Pat.
emotional.
Sharon,
I'm sorry.
it's important to see it and to have those feelings. They drive us forward. Thank you, Pat.
Yeah.
Sharon.
Yeah, hi. I was going to ask this question because it seemed like other people didn't have questions. So if there's time, I'll ask it of Pat, because
Sure.
a few years ago, I heard you give a really powerful presentation on JROTC and the poisons that our high school students were absorbing from the junior ROTC training in their schools. I'm just curious if there's been any headway on reducing that, and if there's been any headway on getting more Veterans for Peace into the schools to teach high school students about these things. Just
hell no, Sharon. I wish I had good news for you. I'll tell you, it was a pivotal moment in my, intellectual and activist life when, I worked with a couple delegates in the Maryland General Assembly, and we put together a brilliant bill that said we are suggesting that lead ammunition, this is radical, you all, okay? This is radical. Lead ammunition should not be used in high school cafeterias or gymnasiums after school. And that JROTC marksmanship programs should be forced to use non-lead particles, non-lead ammunition. you know, it's these little CO2 powered rifles, and it's .177 caliber compared to 22 caliber. It's almost the size of a 22 bullet, but it's powered by CO2 air. It still goes, you know, 600 feet per second compared to 900 feet per second for a 22 bullet. So it'll go through, you know, somebody's temple. But the point is that it spreads lead all over. And we were able to document that the lead is on the cafeteria tables. So we thought, this is not good public policy. So we went to the General Assembly and we got 33 Democrats, not a single Republican, to sign their name on a piece of legislation that says, we don't think lead ought to be used. And the Democratic leadership would not let there be a first reading in 2 different committees. So it died. Sons of bitches. I don't know what transpired behind the scenes, but that was when I wrote a book. And Anne, you were so nice to write something about the book. And then I didn't do any counter recruiting anymore. I mean, for me, that was the lowest lying fruit you could have. Screw that. And then that was when I was on a panel, and I think it was in Minnesota. And you know, I'm talking about, oh, you know, the lead gets on the table, the children. We have it documented in Minnesota and Alaska, the blood lead levels of the children. And I'm on a panel, and I think it was Pat Hines, who was the EPA Lady of the Year. She's a great activist. She's in Massachusetts, Trap Rock, I think she's with. And she was like, hey, man, burn pits in Iraq, PFAS. And PFAS never goes away. And it kills people, and people are breathing it. And that was, for me, 6 years ago. And I realized that, you know, I'm not going to have success trying to keep the military out of the high schools, that I might have success getting veterans pissed off about being poisoned.
Thank you, Pat. And right.
Well, Pat, we want to thank you very, very much for all the work you've been doing in trying to get high schools to not have military training in them, and now on PFAS and all these other poisons. You've been out to Hawaii. You've helped us with the PFAS out here. And I'll just let you know that, again, we have major sewage leaks at Pearl Harbor that's going straight from Pearl Harbor, poop right out into the ocean. But the Navy is going to spend $3.5 billion, not on the sewage plant, but on the biggest pier for submarines, the biggest docking pier thing they've built in the Navy, they say, in decades. So we'll have more of those facilities, but if you're coming to Hawaii for a nice vacation on the beach, don't pick anything that looks like little brown specks, because it's our poop that's coming to see you. Thanks
Right.
again for all your work, and thanks for another excellent program for VFP New York City. Thank you.
Thank
Love
you,
it,
Anne.
right. So Anne's going to be with us. Rachel and I are blessed. Anne's coming to Japan in the summer. Very excited about that.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Pat?
Can I go home now?
I don't think we ever want you to go home, Pat. We need you. Okay, it looks like there's no more questions for you tonight, but there will be. We know that your presentation has certainly led us to very thoughtful insights and to continuing work. And Veterans for Peace stands ready to help you in any way we can. And I'll just mention quickly, you know, our national convention will be once again in August this year, and we should definitely have a presentation and discussion of the multiple types of poisons that are created by the chemical companies and used by the American military and then distributed to all of the ongoing wars all over the world. So thank you so much for your presentation, for your work. We really need people like you to inspire us to continue our work. Thank you. And Rachel, thank you. It's been wonderful. It's wonderful to see you all, and thank you, our wonderful guests from Japan. You are all certainly welcome to stay for the rest of the chapter meeting if you would like to.